We all enjoy being in a beautiful landscape, a spectacular mountain range, gentle rolling hills, a huge flat prairie perhaps, a desert, or being next to the sea. But the resulting photograph often seems a banal snapshot, the kind of thing we have seen 1,000 times before. I think very often the problem is colour. The sky is blue, the grass is green, no surprises there. A photograph is not reality. It is a two-dimensional representation of a past moment. Just because you are enjoying walking in the countryside does not mean your photograph of that countryside will be enjoyable. Most of the colour landscape photographs I admire tend to avoid the blue-green dilemma. The sky will be white or at least cloudy, and the land will have a range of tonalities and hues. It's worth looking at how painters have approached landscape. How have they avoided the danger of cliché or simple boredom when one is confronted with blue sky and green vegetation? Okay, well, I feel I might be using this as an excuse just to show you some of my favourite landscape painting. But feel free to do your own research. It's surprising how often painters avoid large areas of blue and green, or if there is, the colour is at least modulated. That is to say, there is variation of tones. So in a sky by Cézanne, for example, there will be blue but also white, green, yellow, pink or ochre. Even Van Gogh, who loved intense colour, would rarely lay down a flat, unmodulated colour. There would always be lots of other hues and variations going on. Raoul de Keyser confronts the problem and turns the landscape into a strong, abstracted graphic image. Ivan Hitchens will show us beautiful colour tonalities and exhilarating mark making, as does Peter Lanyon. In my last video, part 1, I talked about active and passive colour. In these paintings, colour is active. That is to say, it's actually doing something. It's describing a form and reacting to other colours in the painting in a way that makes the image interesting, lively and vital. Photographers don't have the same level of control over the image. Despite the wonders of Photoshop and Lightroom, one is limited to the scene in front of the camera. But we can at least note the importance of texture, composition, light and shade, variation. Let's ponder for a few moments upon this sublime image by Joel Meyerowitz, Churro, which is probably one of my favourite photographs of all time. Perhaps because it reminds me of the watercolours of John Sell Cotman and Francis Town, two of my favourites. But look at the beautiful play of light and shade on the picket fence, which is echoed in the big clouds, and the warm brown and golds of the field contrasted with the two cool blues of the sky. The regimented sharp verticals stabbing the soft, rounded, cumulus cloud. Such a simple image and such a complicated image at the same time. Beautiful. We saw in part 1 of this video that colour can often be successfully used in cityscapes, such as these by Stephen Shaw, because the natural elements and the natural colours of a landscape are in striking contrast to the man-made environment. But with pure landscape, the use of colour is much more problematic, and it's no wonder that so many decide just to shoot in black and white. There is a school of thought that says, look, we're in 2017, well into the 21st century. There is no excuse to use black and white. It's pretentious, it's not how we see the world, it's nostalgic. And although I do have some sympathy for this view, one simply has to look at the work being done, and I very rarely see a colour landscape photograph that I don't think wouldn't look better in black and white. Very interesting cloud formation here. But is the blue sky and green vegetation necessary? What does colour add to the image? I think here the colour is passive. It's not really doing anything, it's simply there. If we remove the colour, the main focus point, the clouds, are immediately enhanced, and the structure, the architecture of the image, the textures and contrasts are brought forth. We can see just how much the colour obstructs the essential. This is a perfectly decent colour photograph. The colours are actually very subtle, with a strong central motif of the mountain that appears to be almost rising up and breaking through the cloud. But remove the colour, and this narrative is made even more forcefully and takes on an almost apocalyptic quality. Black and white distances you from the scene, makes it more abstract, less commonplace. It reminds you that a photograph is not reality, and consequently heightens one's awareness of the pictorial, the aesthetic qualities of the image. This year's shortlist for the Deutsche Borsch Photography Prize contains only one landscape photographer, Awushka van der Molen, who does exquisite landscapes in black and white. The Sony World Photography Award for Landscape 2017 was awarded to Frederick Brix, who often works in colour for photojournalism and portraits, but his award-winning landscapes are black and white. One of the most popular and influential landscape photographers working today is Michael Kenner, whose work is not in colour. So, am I saying colour landscape bad, black and white good? Well, actually, no, not really. It's just that working in colour for pure landscapes as opposed to cityscapes is exceptionally difficult, and particularly difficult to do well consistently. So difficult, in fact, that even some of our best photographers don't even attempt it. But there is no hard and fast rules in photography, and certainly not in art. Either something works or it doesn't work. I have a personal rule of thumb. If there is orange in the sky, it's bad. But even here, I'm prepared to admit it's a generalization, although I don't think I've ever seen an image to contradict it. Alberto Silvestril is someone I follow on Instagram. These images, full of commonplace green and blues, shouldn't work, but they do, and they are almost parodies of traditional landscapes, and they work because of pitch-perfect composition. Alberto obviously has an incredibly sensitive eye, and I also detect a wry sense of humour in these images too. Over 100 years ago, painters realised that photography had fundamentally changed how we perceive the world. It was no longer acceptable to paint naturalistic views of landscapes or portraits in a way a camera could do so much better. They had to deepen the game and show the world in ways photography never could. Perhaps colour landscape photography needs to up its game now too, be much more aware of composition, juxtaposition, form, negative space, texture, line, ambiguity, irony, parody, history. Simply pointing a lens at a pretty view doesn't cut it anymore. We need to dig deeper, look further, think harder. Or stick to black and white.